Despite being a longtime resident of New York City, I found myself venturing to unfamiliar territory. The city is so vast that even I, a seasoned veteran, can stumble upon hidden gems. This time, I was on the lookout for a dive bar tucked away amongst the more established businesses. These types of places are a dime a dozen in the city, but they have their charm. They offer a chance to meet new and interesting characters who may be difficult to connect with otherwise, although I do prefer to keep my meetings in my office. As I made my way towards the bar, my stomach rumbled, and I realized I was craving burger sliders. I hoped the food would be good. After all, a good meal can make all the difference in a case. Allow me to introduce myself. I am Snickertooth, a private eye. Oh, and if you must know, I'm also a rat. As I walked towards the bar, my thoughts were interrupted by a phone call from a dame named Ruby. She claimed to need my help and promised to provide more details in person. Upon arriving at the bar, I pushed my way through the glass door and into the smoky bar room. The jukebox was playing, and a few beasts in the corner were laughing a little too loudly. Silverware clinked against plates, and the scent of alcohol and food hung in the air. Surprisingly, there was no cigarette smoke. As I scanned the bar, I noticed a pair of rats playing billiards and a female weasel tossing darts. Her inebriated, mustelid friends cheered her on. In the mirror behind the bar, I caught a glimpse of myself, a frazzled brown rat in a trench coat and hat. I continued scanning the busy room until I saw the red felt hat I had been instructed to look for. The owner, a young female rat, eagerly waved me over. However, I quickly noticed that she had a male companion with her, a detail that had not been mentioned in our conversation. My hackles raised at the unexpected surprise. The male rat had gray fur and appeared to be young. I could tell from the anchor brand on his arm, which was barely hidden under his rolled-up sleeves. The mark was burned into his furry bicep, and I guessed he was a seasoned sea rat. I gestured towards the young man, my curiosity piqued. "You didn't say anything about him?" I said, prompting a blink and a tilt of the head from him. "Problem, Paley?" he responded, his tone somewhat defensive. I replied, cautiously taking a seat on the other side of the booth from the two. "That remains to be seen," I said, sensing that she either didn't trust me or was dishonest herself, or perhaps both. I could feel my senses heightening but kept my hackles from doing so. Ruby cleared her throat, breaking the tension. "Leland is actually why I contacted you," she said, redirecting the conversation. I looked from one to the other, eager to hear more. "Well, what's this all about?" I asked. Ruby nudged Leland, encouraging him to speak. "Go ahead, he gets good results," she said with a smile. Leland cleared his throat before speaking, his words hesitant. Yeah, I don't know who I am or where I came from. My memories are scrambled or something? I don't know the right word for it. I ain't so educated." I steepled my fingers, intrigued by his predicament. "Perhaps you need a medical professional, not a detective," I suggested, noting the potential medical issues that could cause memory loss. Leland shifted uncomfortably. "Oh, I'm not comfortable around doctors," he admitted. "You see, I just ended up in the bay with a shipmate of mine and no ship." "How do you know he was a shipmate?" I asked, my detective instincts kicking in. Leland's ears folded back, indicating discomfort. "Well, we were both in uniform, and we knew each other's names. We both kinda woke up in the middle of the sea. There was no ship nearby, and so we had to swim for shore." I found myself jotting notes, eager to unravel the mystery. "And who's your shipmate?" I probed. "Kall Rhodes, and, he's sort of vanished on me," Leland replied, his tone tinged with worry. "Excellent. Now the mystery deepens with the disappearance of a sailor," I remarked. "So, what happened after you made it to shore?" Leland wrinkled his nose, recalling the events. "To be honest, we were both drenched. We managed to find a laundromat and, well, we kind of borrowed some clothes. We didn't have much money on us, just a few nickels." He shook his head. "It cost us $1 to wash and another $1 to dry. Can you believe it?" I found Leland's comment odd and decided to probe further. "How do you know that's expensive?" Leland appeared to have an epiphany as his whiskers twitched. "I'm not entirely sure. It's like trying to recall a half-formed memory, like a developing photo." Suddenly a thought struck me. "Do you happen to remember the name of your ship?" Leland ran a claw along his muzzle, attempting to recall the details. It began with an L, I think. I remember it was cramped on that tin can. Tin can? I repeated, puzzled. Do you remember if the ship had guns? Leland appeared uncertain. I'm not sure. I don't remember. I made a mental note of the information and turned to Ruby, who had been listening to the conversation. Do you think you can assist Mr. Snickertooth? She asked. It would be greatly appreciated. I'm not entirely sure if there's a case for me here, I replied honestly, but I'll do my best to guide you both in the right direction. I looked at Leland. Listen, sailor, can you tell me your last name? If you and Kall still have your original clothes, there might be some identification markings on them. Leland scowled. Sure, my last name is Leeds. It starts with LL. And as for the clothes, we left them at that overpriced laundromat. Tell me, what was the last thing you recall before you plunged into the water? Leland's ears perked up as he scrunched his snout and gazed up at the ceiling. I believe it was a command. Commence, I think. You remember your name, but do you have any recollection of where you grew up, your parents, or anything like that? I asked. I think I'm from Boston, Leland replied. I arched an eyebrow. And how are you so certain? I saw a picture of the bay at an overpriced laundromat. There was a plaque underneath it that read Bay of Boston, and it made me homesick, he explained. Interesting, I muttered. So how did you and Ruby here become acquainted? We ran into each other, Ruby answered, fidgeting in her seat and avoiding eye contact. She peered into her untouched bowl of soup. Leland chimed in. After I lost touch with my shipmate, Ruby and I stumbled upon each other. I was afraid she'd think I was crazy, but she's been helping me adjust to New York. It's different from what I imagined, even the cars. My tail twitched, picking up on subtle clues. Well, Leland, I started, reaching into my pocket. I felt around for my trusty magnifying glass, a treasured heirloom that sometimes proved invaluable to my work. As I peered through the lens, everything took on a green hue, an unexpected occurrence. I held it up to the light to ensure my eyes weren't deceiving me. Wow, you actually carry one of those? Ruby commented as I fiddled with the glass. Leland flinched suddenly, as though receiving an electric shock. No! He exclaimed, startling nearby patrons. The sailor shuddered in fear, causing me to tuck the glass away with flattened ears. Leland blinked in the light, as if awakening from a trance. Can you fill me in on what just happened? I inquired. Both Ruby and I gazed at Leland, waiting for his response. He looked bewildered and began scanning his surroundings. I'm not entirely sure. I just felt something. Leland laughed uneasily, trailing off. I stood up from my seat. Okay, well, I'll investigate further. After acquiring their contact information, I departed from the bar and hailed a taxi. As I journeyed back to my office, the incident with the magnifying glass lingered in my mind. While my peculiar glass device typically revealed glimpses of the past or future, a strange green glow emitting from it was unprecedented. Upon arrival, I immediately dialed a former police associate of mine. Screet, your calls are never good news, growled the dingo on the other end of the line. You know me too well, Alden. That's because we worked together for years, Snickertooth, he chuckled. Listen, by any chance have you recently apprehended someone claiming to be a sailor named Kall? I inquired. After a moment of silence, Alden replied, As a matter of fact, we did. He got into a brawl with some locals and we brought them all in. He's claiming amnesia, but I think he's just drunk. Satisfied with the response, I requested to speak with Kall. Alden begrudgingly agreed, giving me until the morning. Content with my intuition, I hung up and headed to the station to see how Kall's story aligned with Leland's. However, upon arriving, I was met with an unexpected scene. Officers were stationed outside the building appearing irate. 2 military trucks were parked in the lot. What's going on here? I asked the closest beat cop, who happened to be a skunk. I have no idea. They just showed up, he replied. As I gazed out the window, a peculiar sight caught my eye. A pair of wolves were leading a rat into one of the waiting trucks, as a group of various animals in fatigues piled in after them. An otter in full-service dress, adorned with numerous stars on his shoulder, followed closely behind. Curiosity piqued, I approached the group and attempted to ask a few questions. However, my efforts were met with silence, and the trucks departed without giving any further explanation. Making my way into the station as inconspicuously as possible, I bumped into Alden, who seemed equally puzzled by the strange scene that had just unfolded. "What just happened?" I asked him. "Was that Kall?" Alden nodded in agreement. "Yeah, they said they were picking him up for disciplinary action." I raised an eyebrow in confusion. The military usually doesn't send an admiral and an entire platoon for that sort of thing. Alden looked tense as he replied, "I've never seen anything like it." As I hailed a taxi back to my office/apartment, my mind raced with questions. Was Leland in danger? Had he angered someone in a high position? My paranoia only intensified when I noticed a rat in black clothing staring up at my window. Quickly, I armed myself with my revolver and went downstairs to confront the intruder. But by the time I reached the street, he had vanished into the rainy night. Frustrated and anxious, I returned to my office, poured myself a stiff drink, and tried to get some rest. The next morning, I reached out to both Ruby and Leland for any further information. "Have you recalled anything else, Leland? Perhaps something that may have angered someone higher up the chain?" I inquired. Leland's response was disheartening. "Nah, it's still all jumbled." "All right, be cautious and stay put. Kall was taken from jail by some military personnel," I cautioned. The other end was silent for a moment before a voice replied, "Goodness, I suppose we're Navy now and I'm AWOL." "Judging by the number of soldiers I saw, that seems unlikely," I responded. "Let's discuss this further in person." I met the two young rats in a small apartment, but Leland wasn't forthcoming with any additional information. That's when I came up with an idea. "It may take some time, but I can look into any military records that may exist for you and your friend. In the meantime, it's best that you stay out of sight." "I don't like what's going on," I suggested. "Alternatively, we could try the glass again. I know it frightened you before, but it may jog your memory." Leland's tail stood straight up. "I'd rather not, at least not for now." I nodded and stepped outside, where I noticed the same rat in black I had seen before lurking in the shadows of an alleyway near the apartment complex. That was the last straw. I marched towards him, reaching for my weapon in my pocket. I expected him to flee, but he remained still. "All right, pal, start talking before I get rough," I growled, revealing my teeth. The rat tipped his fedora. "It's a pleasure to meet you in person, Mr. Snickertooth. Quit stalling and start talking. You're not doing yourself any favors by wearing all black and hiding in the shadows," I retorted. A hint of amusement flashed across his face as he revealed his teeth. "That's a bit hypocritical of you, don't you think?" I let out a sigh. "Who are you?" "Events are in motion, events that should have been left alone. Your sailor friends have become entangled in something they cannot comprehend and are now adrift in a dark storm," he warned. I crossed my arms. "Are you a drama major?" He twitched his tail and reached into his coat. "No, but you should be aware of the danger you're in." "Not so fast," I cautioned. "He's given us the location," the stranger said, attempting to ease my suspicions. My hand hovered over my weapon as he slowly produced a key. 1273 Dock Street. "You'll find something of interest there," he added, his voice steady. I approached with caution and took the key from him. "And what do I call you?" I asked, backing away. "Mr. Fix-It," he replied with a tip of his hat before departing. It was then that I noticed other peculiarly dressed individuals lurking in the alleyway. My guard was up, but before I could react, a thick green fog enveloped us, obscuring my vision. Suddenly, a blue flash illuminated the area, and when the mist cleared, the strangers were nowhere in sight. My curiosity was piqued, and I followed the lead to Dock Street, a desolate area filled with dilapidated warehouses. The address seemed unpromising, just another rundown warehouse by the bay. As I entered, the sound of my footsteps echoed off the walls, and pigeons flapped overhead. Amidst the wreckage of what was once an office, I found a locked file cabinet. Inserting the key, I pulled it forward to reveal a hidden stairwell. Descending into the darkness, I discovered a sprawling interior, abandoned and bare except for strange equipment, and a blueprint of a destroyer known as a tin can. The room appeared to have been a bustling laboratory, complete with scientists, armed guards, and officers. As I examined the blueprint through my magnifying glass, I noticed odd devices being fitted to the ship, along with a memo that left me with more questions than answers. Official orders had been issued designating the test ship as the destroyer Elridge. The name sounded familiar to me, but I dismissed it as a legend or hoax. I had heard stories about a ship that had vanished or turned invisible, and its crew had suffered in unimaginable ways. However, my curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to talk to Leland about it. When I arrived at Leland's apartment, it was already dark outside. I had stopped at a hobby store earlier to see if it would jog my memory. After exchanging pleasantries with my clients, I pulled out a model of a destroyer, the same class as the one used in the experiment, and showed it to Leland. Leland's tail twitched as he took the model, his face clouded with memories. "Yeah, I can still hear the engines thrumming beneath me. Treat her like a lady, and she'll bring you home. Almost all the time," he added, a twitch of his whiskers betraying something at the edge of his memory. "Do you recall the ship's name?" I asked, my curiosity piqued. Elridge? Leland shuddered, his voice barely above a whisper. I placed a claw on the magnifying glass and suggested, "Perhaps you should take a closer look through this." Leland gazed through the magnifying glass, and his eyes widened with horror. Oh no. I remember now. We were in a space between spaces, where no ship belonged. Nothing was right. Those things... Kall and I somehow managed to get away, he recounted, his voice trembling. I put the magnifying glass away and reassured him. Your amnesia was likely a defense mechanism. The memory of the destroyer Elridge and its mysterious disappearance had resurfaced, but it seemed that some things were better left forgotten. Leland slumped back onto the couch, his body shaking with sobs as Ruby tried to comfort him. "I don't belong here," he muttered, his voice barely audible. As if on cue, a sharp knock at the door startled them both. I motioned for them to stay put and cautiously made my way to the door, my hand instinctively reaching for the gun in my coat pocket. Through the peephole, I caught a glimpse of the unwelcome visitor and scowled. "Fix it," I growled, flinging the door open. "You figured it out, I presume?" he replied, his voice laced with arrogance. "I did," I said, eyeing him suspiciously. "I'm the only one that can help him in his unique situation," Fix-It said, his tone dripping with condescension. I balled my fists, the memory of what happened to Kall fresh in my mind. "Yeah? Like what happened to Kall?" Fix-It shook his head. "No. That admiral is a renegade trying to revive an experiment far too dangerous to repeat. My associates are busy undermining that operation and rescuing Kall." I narrowed my eyes, unsure of whether to believe him. "Why don't you take a hike?" Fix-It tilted his head. "Perhaps you should ask him. It is his life, after all." I turned to Leland, who seemed lost in thought. "You're not buying this, are you?" Leland sighed, his gaze fixed on the floor. "After what I've seen, I think I can afford a bit of faith. I'll go with him." Fix-It nodded. "It's the right decision, Leland. We've had experience in this sort of thing." He gestured for Leland to follow him out of the room. "We have a car waiting. We'd best hurry." Leland gave Ruby a final embrace before stepping out into the hall. As they disappeared from view, I turned to Fix-It, my suspicions still lingering. "I'm going to be looking into you," I said firmly. Fix-It smiled. "I'm sure, but I don't exist. I do believe we'll see each other again, though. Rest assured, this is the right course of action." With a final nod, he disappeared down the hall with Leland. I swallowed hard, unsure of anything. I watched as they got into a sleek, jet-black sedan and drove off into the night. "Leland, where are you sailing to now, bud?" I whispered to myself.